Super Rugby weekend games, folks. 3 games on Saturday, 1 game on Sunday. On paper, I reckon the Chiefs and the Brumbies looks like the best of the matchups, but we'll still go through all the squads, some stats, predictions, and you guys can let me know your thoughts on how these games might be going to play out. The first one, Moana, Pasifika, and the Tars. Very different records. The Moana Pasifika boys still a game behind after their game against the Force the other week was postponed. 1-8. The Tars 6-4, flying high after knocking off the Crusaders. And helpfully, both these teams have kind of made minimal changes to last week. So very stable lineups, which is pretty pleasing. Moana Pasifika haven't really been able to do the whole stable lineups thing that much this season. So I think that's very welcome news. Funaki moving up to the starting lineup from the bench, I think, is the only change to the starting 15. You've still got Stowers, who has been having, in terms of ball carries and tackles, like he's one of the star performers of the season on a losing side thus far. Inari and Liliafano still 9-10. Toala's still at fullback with Ta'afu and Almua in the midfield. So yeah, I'll be interested to see if they can kind of physically get on top of the Brumbies, the Waratahs midfield, but then they got a pretty big unit at 13, do the Brumbies as well. Lincoln McClutchy's still on the bench. He had a bit of a stinker last week, but he's a good player, man. I back him to bounce back sooner rather than later. For the Tars, they're without Michael Hooper this week, which is obviously pretty bad news. Any team that's missing a world-class guy like that is going to be worse off. But Charlie Gamble's been having a really good season, been really a big threat at the breakdown. He moves from 6 to 7. Harris has been a big ball carrier, so he's up from the bench at 6. Cridge is up from the bench to start in the second row, and then Holtz is in at tight head prop. But the back line's the same. Jake Gordon's been having a good season. Tane Edmed's there. Parise, like I mentioned, at 13. So, yeah. This one, I mean, the Tars are the favourites. And they still concede the most penalties of any team in Super Rugby, the Tars. And I think they averaged 13. I think it was like 16 last week against the Crusaders, if memory serves. So that's going to cost you in some games, but it didn't last week. So, yeah, their attacking numbers are still pretty good, despite the fact that they are a little bit guilty discipline-wise. Moana Pasifika, honestly, their problem, I think, at least looking at the numbers, they don't have enough ball. They don't have enough ball. They play with the least possession of all the teams. They just need to hang on the pill for a bit. Because, like, their attacking numbers are pretty good for a team which doesn't have that much ball. You know what I mean? Like, if you've got less ball, you're probably going to have less clean breaks and less defenders beaten, less points, basically. Not necessarily. It's not always a one-on-one relationship, but I do feel like if these guys get more ball, they're going to get more results. They're just playing with scraps at the moment. And yeah, it puts your defense under a bit of pressure when you're having to defend kind of wave after wave. So we'll see how they go. Bookies have got the Tars by 8. And the Rugby Forecast algorithm's got the Tars by 10. So they are favourites. This one's at Mount Smart. It's kind of a late afternoon game, so it's the first one to get us kicked off on Saturday. The second one, Chiefs and Brumbies. There's a lot to like about this one, at least on paper. The Chiefs, are they a proper contender at 7-3? The Brumbies are looking like it. They've knocked off 2 Kiwi teams, but now they've got to come to New Zealand, and we'll see how well they are able to get that in. I remember the Brumbies winning in Hamilton a few years ago when the Aussies hadn't won in New Zealand for ages. It was the Brumbies who broke that drought. So, like, if the Brumbies are a legit, like, you know, top 1 or 2 teams, this is the game they absolutely need to target to come here to New Zealand and get a win over a pretty good Chiefs side. The Chiefs, if they want to show that they're a proper, like, 1 or 2 team, they need to knock off these Brumbies and give them their second loss. So we'll see how things go. The Chiefs have got Trask in at fullback, which I'm pretty pleased about. He's a real steady hand at back. Remember, the Chiefs have had a bunch of COVID cases the last few weeks, so they've kind of been fielding a bit of a skeleton side that, you know, just whoever was available, like playing Tupaia on the wing. He's actually back at 12 this week. Nono Satura's back on the wing, and he's been in cracking form. Sam Kane's back at number 7, and he's captain. You've still got Sol Cooley, you've still got Gatland. So yeah, pretty stable stuff, and actually a stronger looking team than the one they fielded last week when they weren't exactly that flash, but they still managed to get a good win over the Reds. The Brumbies, also pretty stable. Slipper starts ahead of Seo, and Whainga'a is in a hooker. Otherwise, the team is pretty much the same. That back row of Samu, Brown, and Baltini has been really good this season. Nick White, him and half the Aussie halfbacks are having really good years. So Yeah, he's captain, and that back three of Banks, Wright, and Simone is legit dangerous. Like, if you're looking at the stats, you think mauls with the Brumbies. Most mauls, least offloads. But they still get the ball to their backs and score some really sweet tries. The Chiefs, you don't need me to tell you, most run meters, most offloads, most passes, they're a fun team to watch. Whether they go down in flames or whether they get a win, they're fun. They do kick it a bit more than the Brumbies, though, which is not what you would think with the kind of stereotype, right? So, yeah, this one should be, I reckon, a pretty interesting game. Interestingly, the bookies, though, have got the Chiefs by 7, but on the flip side, the algorithm says the Brumbies by 1. That's the only result this week that's a split between the bookies and the Rugby Forecast algorithm. So we'll see which one proves correct this week. The final of the Saturday games is the Force against the Crusaders. Now, on paper, this looks like last week, where on paper the Blues were supposed to go into Perth and flog the Force. But man, if the Force got some bloody goal kicks that they missed, they would have won. The Force were really good value for their loss, which is a weird thing to say, but it's legit true. Remember, the Force are also a game behind everybody else with their COVID thing a couple of weeks ago. The Crusaders, they very rarely lose 2 games on the trot, and they lost last week to the Tars. So they are going to have a point to prove. If you're a Force fan, maybe look out for a bit of backlash, but like I said, there's reasons to be optimistic with the Force based on the shift that the players put in last week. They've made a few changes to the Force. Ralston's come in on the right wing. Callan shifts to the number 7 jersey. Anstey is in at number 8. Finds Lelewasa is still at 9, and he's been, he's kind of put Ian Pryor out of a job because, whilst Pryor has got the goal kicking, Lelewasa just keeps the ball moving. He's a real kind of high tempo halfback, so he's been, like most of the Aussie halfbacks, having a really, really good year. The front row of Robertson, Kaitu'u, and Medrano is going to have to be in top form because the Crusaders front row, whilst it's not the kind of more familiar names that you're used to, kind of always brings the heat. So we'll have to see how that battle stacks up. The Crusaders have brought back a bunch of All Blacks. Moanga's back starting after having last week off. George Bridge is back starting. Braden Ennor is back starting. Ethan Blackadder is back starting. Ricky Jackson is in a hooker, not that experienced. And Tamaiti Williams gets a start. He's a big unit of a man. Plus, Ollie Jaeger has been in pretty solid form all year as well. He's still in at tight head. So, yeah, if you're looking at that lineup, it's not half bad from the Crusaders when you're putting these guys who are back on top of the likes of a Whitelock and a Matera, Will Jordan, and co. So, yeah, it's a good-looking Crusaders team. But at 7-3, they have been underperforming a bit this year from what we've been used to in recent years. Stats-wise, the Force have got loads of possession. They're one of the top possession-based teams. But, some of the stats that you would expect to go with that aren't always there. Like, their run meters per carry is actually one of the lowest. So, lots of ball, but not the most effective carries at times. So that's an area they'll need to be a wee bit sharper. The Crusaders, highest kind of ruck percentage in the competition. They're a really hard team to pinch ball off, and their run meters per carry on contrast is actually pretty good. They're 4.2 run meters per carry. The Force are at 3.6. The Force are one of the lower teams. The Crusaders are one of the top. Remember, the gold standard is kind of 4, so not surprisingly the Crusaders are above that. Predictions-wise, the bookies have got the Crusaders by 18, and the algorithm more or less agrees by saying 17. So the Force are up against it with this one. We'll see if they can give the home fans something to cheer about. So we will see. And the last one, the Sunday game. In terms of pure fun and spectacle, the Hurricanes against the Drua might be that game. I'll get to the stats in a second, but this one could be very entertaining. The Hurricanes at 5-5 have been a bit disappointing, but some teams have got to lose sometimes, right? If a team like the Chiefs is going to have 7-3, they need to beat some of their opposition. Likewise, the Crusaders with the same record. The Blues have got a positive record. So the losses have got to come from somewhere. And for the Hurricanes, unfortunately, that's been some of them. The Drua 1-9 have likewise been encouraging at times, but last week, really cracking first half and then just couldn't keep it up for the full 80. So that was maybe a bit of the fact that they were at home for the first time and maybe put it all out there for the first half. So we'll see how they go with their first game on New Zealand soil. The Hurricanes have made a bunch of changes. Morby's in at fullback. Hussin is back on the right wing. Karifi is back at 7. That's good news. Aumua is there at hooker. Tyler Laubscher is in at 8. I can't remember if I've seen him play. I probably have. I've got a pretty bad memory. But, yeah, maybe not starting. Blake Gibson shifts to number 6. Walker Leawere is up from the bench. So it's a bunch of changes. Plus, you got Owen Franks bracketed in on the bench. Whether he starts or not is apparently not yet determined. And Dane Coles, man, we haven't seen that guy in donkey's years. So be good to see him back. For the Drua, they've also made a few changes. Matasiwa is in at 12. In for Revovo, which is maybe a little bit disappointing because Revovo has been in really great form. Likewise, they've put in Ratu on the left wing, which means there's no Habosi this week. And that guy has been absolutely lightning. So if you're a Canes fan, be happy that Habosi is not in the lineup because that guy is fire. Togi Atima is in at hooker. Tawake gets a start at tie head. Caleb Muntz is getting a start at 10. I don't think we've seen him play for a few weeks. Hey, it's been Tete Tela. Tela is relegated to the bench for this one. So, yeah, it is. Derelangi is also moved to the 6th jersey. So, yeah, it's the Drua have been pretty consistent with their rotation, to be honest. They very rarely keep like the same 15, even 14 or 13. It's always like a number of changes for each game. So, a good bit of depth building, but maybe sometimes you lose that that kind of consistency, which is nice to build those partnerships between players. But speaking of the entertainment stuff, you got the Hurricanes who get the most clean breaks per game at almost 6. The average is like 4.5. So the Canes are a team that's likely to cut teams to bits against the Drua, who beat the most defenders per game. So they might not necessarily go between two defenders. They're going to go over them. They're going to smash them. So 24, almost 25 defenders beating a game. The average is like 19. So, yeah, just in terms of pure entertainment, neither side kicks or mauls that much. So if you want, like, pure stereotypical, like, clean breaks, defenders beaten, not that much kicking, not that much mauling, this is the game to watch. Whether it's close or not kind of remains to be seen. The predictions is that it's not going to be close. Bookies, Canes by 15. Algorithm, Canes by 27. So we will see, folks, how this one goes. Yeah, 4 games on. They're all, as I said, interesting for their own reasons. On paper, it should be the Chiefs and the Brumbies, but we will kind of see how the rest of them go. You guys let me know your thoughts, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.